I'm Caroline Hyde. This is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Facebook with another solid quarter in the books with a big pop in mobile ad revenue. We'll break down the numbers ahead. Plus, the inside track on GE's digital pivot. CEO Jeff Immelt shares how America's biggest manufacturer turned to big data and won in a Bloomberg exclusive interview. And Reddit's co-founder adds his voice to the chorus of criticism. Alexis Ohanian discusses the legality of Trump's travel ban ahead. First, to our lead. Facebook shares surging in after hours. Check it out. We are at all-time highs if we hold on to these gains, up 4.6%, trading at 136.34. The company reported a 51% jump in sales to $8.8 billion, topping analyst projections. The biggest driver, advertisers' continued push to reach consumers on mobile phones. Now, the social network's user base is continuing to grow. It reported just under 2 billion monthly active users and 1.75 billion users accessing the platform on their smartphones. That's about 84%. This move solidifies Facebook's position in the market for mobile advertising, just behind Alphabet's Google. Joining us to dig into the numbers from New York, Melissa Parrish, Forrester Research Director, and, of course, friend of the show, David Kirkpatrick, CEO of Techonomy and Bloomberg contributor. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Melissa, first to the numbers. I mean, were there any clouds amid some big silver linings here? The revenue, the earnings per share once again beating.
Clouds, I can't really think of any. I'm sure there are some people out there who would be upset that the numbers aren't even better than they are. But I mean, come on. I think analysts were expecting some incredible results, and pretty much everything beat it. We have 25% of the world's population using the platform on a monthly basis. I can't see any clouds there.
Just amazing. Yeah, on a daily basis, 3 times the US population. That is just phenomenal. 1.2 billion people addicted to this particular app. David, dig into the growth drivers here. When I was speaking to the CFO on the call, David Wayno really was trying to point out that it's businesses getting mobile with not only Facebook, about 65 million business pages, but now 5 million Instagram. That's big growth.
Well, I think they're doing superbly on mobile, but when I look at growth drivers and I think of where their real prospects are going forward, it's the truly global nature of their business. And if you look at the growth they're seeing in Asia and the rest of the world, Africa and Latin America, they are doing surprisingly well. And this has always been where I thought that their long-term really big potential was, because, you know, they make 10 times more per user in the United States than they do in Asia, and yet the opportunity down the road to build those numbers more to parity is real, and so they're getting a much faster user growth in those regions, and they're making somewhat more money per user. So I was really struck their Asian revenue was up 59%. That's really impressive, and the rest of world, that revenue was up 52%. So, you know, even though the numbers are small compared to Europe and the US, this is where the opportunity is long term.
And the potential needs feeding, doesn't it, Melissa? And we're hearing the CFO again telling me they're not backing away from their view that they need to spend aggressively. It seemed to be the headcount in particular they're ramping up about, well, more than 34% in the fourth quarter. And they say they're going to accelerate that even more in 2017. Are they spending wisely?
I think so. I mean, to achieve any kind of innovation, whether you're talking about ad products or global expansion, you have to have the resources to do it. And if you've got the cash, you know, that's where to spend it. I think, you know, the idea of ad product innovation goes hand in hand with feature set innovation. So you got to give something to the users to keep them engaged, and that's going to change as they continue to grow in global markets as well. The expectations for a social platform in Asia are actually quite different than the expectations in the US and the UK and the rest of Europe. So I think you have to invest smartly, and you've got to get the best engineers to do it. So yeah, I do think it's smart.
And David, what about the move to video? Video was really what Sheryl Sandberg, what Mark Zuckerberg had been really bigging up over the past few years. Still mobile, still video. And there was a Wall Street Journal piece out saying, look, they might be even developing a TV app. Is still video where it's hot?
Well, I think that's where they can really compensate for this problem that even they've acknowledged, that they've really sort of saturated our news feeds with as many ads as we're likely to be able to handle, particularly on mobile. So either they have to charge more per ad, they have to grow their user base so they can show more people ads, or they've got to find other kinds of ads that make more money. And I think video ads can do that. I thought that journal piece suggesting they could have a set-top box app was really interesting, a TV app that, to me, it was a little unclear how it might work, but my own guess is down the road they'd really like to have some kind of app that allows you to really watch TV in all the ways we watch TV and still really be on Facebook in a fundamental way on your TV. They've tried various versions of this in the past and it hasn't really worked, but if they could make that work, then they could find new ways to show us ads while we're watching TV, and they could just start raking in even more dough.
In fact, Mark Zuckerberg just on the analyst call right now saying that he will seek original content deals and he's still putting video first. Melissa, I'm going to find a cloud amid all this silver lining, because earlier today it looks as though Facebook did lose out in the courts. It looks as though Oculus, it was ruled, potentially was built upon stolen technology. $500 million, the damages they're going to have to pay. That's about a quarter of the price tag of Oculus when they bought it in 2014. Is this a particular concern?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, I think, of course, it's a concern, right? It is a court ruling that's going to hit a pocketbook, and that's always a concern. I don't want to minimize that. And of course, Oculus being an engine for innovation, anything that questions its source code is going to be of concern. But 500 million is something that I'm sure will continue to be litigated for a while, versus the kind of growth that we're seeing for the core platform. I'm sure it's a concern. Is it a deal breaker? I can't really see it as being that.
And David, what about the fake news and how Mark Zuckerberg himself has been trying to respond to this, potentially a little awkwardly to begin with, but now with some fervour, and indeed trying to perhaps orchestrate the way in which he interacts with his own user base nowadays?
Well, I think that it continues to be an issue of concern to the intelligentsia. It is not a concern to the average Facebook user. I think mostly they just want to be entertained and diverted, and they are. I do think Facebook is taking the issue very seriously. I think you're going to see them take more and more measures to try to avoid seeming to kind of compound the partisanship that's really so big a problem in so many societies around the world. The problem they have is that they are so global, they're operating in so many different languages, that this problem really is global. Even the Russian interference in the media is global. So, you know, it's not going to be that easy for Facebook to really get a grip on this right away. I think they will over time. Could I quickly on Oculus? You know, I think Oculus is something that maybe is starting to look like they overpaid for, unlike Instagram, where they got a spectacular deal. And I also think, you know, Palmer Luckey, who may be the guy that maybe gets some of the blame for this lawsuit loss, also had some pretty embarrassing behavior around politics and his own public statements, and it may be that they are regretting a little bit their association with him. On the other hand, they've now brought Hugo Barra in from Xiaomi to take over Oculus, and I think he'll be a great leader for that part of the company.
David Kirkpatrick, great insights there, CEO of Techonomy. Melissa Parrish, Forrester Research Director. You are both sticking with me. You're coming back a little bit later in the hour. Facebook's conference call is only just begun, and we'll bring you all the headlines as they cross. Stick with us. Now, another Bloomberg scoop. Apple is designing a new chip for future Mac laptops. The new chips could take on more of the functionality currently handled by Intel processors. That's according to people familiar with the matter. The chips are already being used in the latest MacBook Pro. We'll have more on this story later in the hour. Coming up, it's been called the front page of the internet. We'll catch up with Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian and why he thinks Trump's travel ban is potentially unconstitutional. Next, this is Bloomberg. Hewlett-Packard Enterprise is ramping up its M&A with the purchase of Niara for an undisclosed terms. Niara is a security startup that uses machine learning and data analytics to find security threats. Now, the deal will bolster the company's networking products that help connect everything from computers to handheld smart devices. HPE is continuing to look for deals to spin off services and some of its software assets. Now, leaders in tech had a visceral reaction to President Trump's travel ban, which banned people from 7 prominently Muslim countries from entering the US. Now, the ban hit a chord for Alexis Ohanian, that's as the son of an undocumented immigrant from Germany and the great-grandson of refugees who fled the Armenian genocide. Ohanian took to the social media platform he co-founded to share his family's immigration journey, calling the executive order, quote, deeply un-American and potentially unconstitutional. Joining us for an exclusive interview is Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian. We thank you for your time, Alexis. Great to welcome you to the show.
Thank you, Karen.
And I was moved by reading your piece. You said welcoming immigrants and refugees has been our country's unfair advantage, and coming from an immigrant family has been mine as an entrepreneur. How was your immediate reaction? How do you think the community in Silicon Valley has responded?
Well, I think it's been pretty loud and pretty consistent, not just in Silicon Valley, but across the country. One of the things I felt obligated to do was share my story with a platform, Reddit, which we built to be a home for conversation and encourage others to tell their immigrant stories or their families' immigrant stories. And as of now, there are literally tens of thousands of comments, thousands of which are deeply personal and genuine stories of people whose families or they themselves came here, and an ethos of just how much they appreciate being here. And that's that secret sauce I was talking about. It's the fact that it is a constant rejuvenation of people who really, really, really appreciate this country in a way that someone like me, who was born in Brooklyn, can't fully understand, because I don't quite know just how good I have it. And you don't have to look too far in Silicon Valley to see so many founders that are immigrants themselves or children of them.
I mean, I think half of all those that have been born out of Silicon Valley have been run by immigrant leaders. What about the response, though? It's wonderful to be able to get up and put one's view across, and the comments that you've sparked have been numerous, and there's a surge in terms of voice on the internet. But what about action? In terms of activity, we are seeing demonstrations, legal steps, and some donations, of course, going to the ACLU. But is this tangible enough?
I think it's a start. We actually basically donated our front page and all the advertising there to the ACLU yesterday. I think we're finding more and more opportunities, whether it is in civil protest, which is a very, very American right, donations to groups like the ACLU that are working hard to make change and protect our rights and our constitutional rights in particular, and then also just good old-fashioned phone calls. 5 years ago, I was part of hundreds of thousands of Americans who defeated 2 really bad bills, SOPA and PIPA. And those bills were considered inevitable, and about 4 months later, unthinkable. And that's simply because people picked up their phone, called their representatives, called their senators, and said, this is bad. This is bad for America, and here's why. And so I think it's going to take all these things. The internet, platforms like Reddit are very powerful tools to connect people. But at the end of the day, it takes individuals to actually create change. And some of that is just old-fashioned phone calls.
Are you optimistic it would be unwound?
I'm very optimistic, and I have to be, because this great experiment that is America is constantly in motion, constantly in flux, and I really do believe constantly moving forward. We are always trending in the right direction, even though sometimes it feels like a step backwards, which is why I wrote what I wrote. But I believe we're going to get there through more discussion and not less.
How much would it actually hurt Reddit, for example, if you couldn't have immigrant talent?
Well, I mean, we're only about 150 strong right now, but we had a number of people within the office who themselves are immigrants to this country, or who have families who were. And so it was very clear for everyone involved just how important an issue this was, not just for us to be able to hire the best people in the world to come here and create value and create more jobs, but also for the spirit of our platform. We want, we're very proud of 280 million monthly active users, but we still have a lot of growing to do, and a lot of that's going to come from having the most global platform possible. And to do that, we need to have voices and opinions within the company that are as global and broad as possible. So it's very important for our success as a company, and I would argue very important for our success as a nation.
Now, we've seen a lot of leaders in technology come out and stand opposed to what Donald Trump has done with the travel ban. Interestingly, some faster than others. I know that in particular, Uber has suffered a lot of criticism, and Delete Uber was trending. It has been hit on its rankings on Apple App Store. You are actually a supporter of Delete Uber, am I right?
You know, I haven't publicly said anything about it, mostly because I don't fully understand the depth of it. As I understand, there was a decision made during a New York strike to keep running while taxis were not. But I've really only read one headline about it, so I don't really know enough to have an intelligent comment on it. Generally speaking, though, I think what we as citizens are really starting to appreciate is the effect social media can have on changing perceptions and changing actions. And so I think I saw a headline that Uber had made a significant donation now as a result, right? That happens because citizens take to platforms, they speak their voice, and effectively, make change happen.
What about the voice of Silicon Valley in Washington? There are Travis Kalanick's going to be one of them, Elon Musk in an advisory panel. Are you pleased that Silicon Valley has this direct communication with Donald Trump? Do you think it might make an impact?
I don't know if it'll make an impact. It's still too early to tell, but I think it's important. I think one of the things that we saw even during President Obama's administration is that the more voices we can have who understand technology in Washington, the better. I think a lot of this just comes down to a lot of the people involved with making laws aren't necessarily technologists themselves. A lot of the tech stuff that we do talk about ends up being pretty straightforward once you can cut through the sort of technical jargon. And the question is, can we be up to the challenge of having the patience and having the grit to educate and to come not from a place of Silicon Valley snobbery, but come from a place of really, really wanting the best decisions possible to be made for our country around tech and bringing our expertise to the table as equals.
Talking of education, it's on a day where we have Facebook earnings, and this is a company that's had to fight off a wave of criticism to do with fake news. Now, news and the veracity of it is something that Reddit had to tackle, and is this something that your own network, that Facebook is tackling in the right way, that Alphabet is at the moment, and enough steps being taken, and is there any more that you'd like to see to be done?
So we were pretty insulated from the rash of the very sort of explicit fake news that platforms like Facebook saw, because often the perpetrators of it who were creating this news would try to game or cheat Reddit in order to bolster it onto the front page. We already have tools in place that work very, very hard to thwart people from gaming the system. And that's just sort of the nature of the platform. It's about trying to use those upvotes and those downvotes to make sure that good content bubbles up. Our community, as well as the tools that we have on the back end, actually do a pretty good job curbing the really obvious scammy stuff. But the big gulf, that gray area, is I think where we're still all trying to figure out how do we best address news that isn't explicitly fake. It's not just some random person who's built a fake website that pushes out obviously fake headlines, but are news organizations that aren't always presenting the full story. And we don't have a good answer for that. I think the trend that we are on is we want to give our users the most information. We want to give them the most ability, whether it's through other users crowdsourcing counterpoints or their upvotes and their downvotes. We want to give them the most information possible so that they can make the best ultimate decision possible. But this is definitely new territory. And what we've seen from the administration is that alternate facts, I think was the quote, apparently exist for them. And that's not a world that I think any of us are really familiar with. And so it's going to become more important than ever for the press to have a role in this world, because every functioning democracy needs a high-functioning media. So we shall see.
Well, I hope this media organization can still lure you on to be able to discuss these sorts of really important debates. It's been wonderful having some time with you. Thank you very much indeed. It was Alexis Ohanian, Reddit co-founder. Now coming up, Apple stock popped in the session as investors reacted to Tuesday's earnings, but could this push the stock into overbought territory? Well, we'll explain, it already has. Next, and another check on Facebook shares, still higher as the earnings call continues. Mobile ads continue to dominate the company's revenue. Interestingly, CFO David Wayner just said on the call that Facebook will stop breaking out mobile usage. We'll continue to bring you updates throughout the hour. This is Bloomberg.
Our main priority is to grow the business while maintaining At this time, the company's strong balance sheet and financial performance puts us in a position to make opportunistic repurchases.
Tesla started testing 4 self-driving cars on California's public roads late last year. This, according to reports made public Wednesday by the state's Department of Motor Vehicles. Tesla's 4 vehicles traveled a total of 550 miles in October and November of last year with no accidents. And another milestone for the company, Tesla officially dropped the word motors from its name. That's according to an SEC filing. Tesla had already shortened its name on the company website back in July as CEO Elon Musk began the process of acquiring SolarCity. The move may remind you of Apple's decision to drop the word computer from its name back in 2007, the year it released the first iPhone. And shares of Apple surged 6% in reaction to its earnings results after the bell Tuesday. Investors are cheering the tech giant's record-breaking sales figures on the iPhone. Now, if you dig a little deeper, though, this surge, well, its recent surge has caused it to cross a key technical level. Get into my Bloomberg. Here you will see the RSI. If you just type this in on your function, Relative Strength Index. What it shows you here on the bottom line is if you go above the red, this is the mark of 70, it shows that you've entered overbought territory. We are currently the most overbought for Apple shares since March 2012. Check out the price, highest since July 2015. All about those technical indicators. Now, checking in on the Facebook earnings call, meanwhile, CFO David Wayner telling analysts, quote, "We continue to expect that our ad revenue growth rate will come down." This is Bloomberg.
I'm Elisa Parenti, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's start with a check of your first word news. President Trump arrived at Dover Air Force Base today to meet the remains of Chief Petty Officer William Owens. He died Sunday during a special forces raid in Yemen. He was killed in the first counterterrorism operation of the Trump administration. British lawmakers have backed a bill authorizing the start of the EU exit process. After 2 days of debate, legislators agreed to respect voters' June 23rd decision to leave the bloc. The UK wants to have the bill approved, so next month it can meet a March 31st deadline. French presidential candidate François Fillon says he'll remain in the race despite further revelations this week about his use of public funds to employ family members. A new poll shows Emmanuel Macron emerging as de facto frontrunner. It also suggests he would beat far-right candidate Marine Le Pen in a runoff. The U.S. National Security Advisor says the administration is putting Iran on, quote, notice after it tested a ballistic missile. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu plans to bring up renewed sanctions on Iran when he meets this month with President Trump. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,600 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Elisa Parenti. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 p.m. Wednesday here in New York and already 6:30 Thursday morning in Singapore. I'm joined by Bloomberg's David Ingles with a look at the markets. David, good morning.
And a good morning from Singapore, Elisa. Well, we're looking at a mixed start. Not exactly, I guess, the clearest of leads that we got out of Wall Street. As you mentioned, there are futures in Japan, Australia. Few points up. Wouldn't put too much into it at the moment. China is still closed. The rest of Asia, of course, back in the saddle this Thursday. Now, India's one market I'm watching very closely, head and shoulders above everyone else on Wednesday after the government basically decided not to take away these current tax breaks on equity investment. It was, in fact, the best budget day there for the markets in Mumbai in over 10 years. So do we see a day two, essentially, is what we're asking here. Now, within the equity space, we're watching Asian car makers in light of the January sales reports in the U.S., apart from Toyota, I guess, which reported double-digit decline. The likes of Nissan, Honda, Hyundai, Kia, all reported decent month for January. And, of course, I'm watching shares of Sony. The company reports earnings after the closing bell in Tokyo. We'll see, of course, what they plan to do with the movie business after taking that $1 billion write-down, and just really how they look to avoid that in the future and turn things around. So, lots to talk about in Asia. I'm David Ingles here in Singapore. More from Bloomberg Technology next.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyde. Our top story, Facebook still jumping in after-hours trade. Get into my terminal. You'll see we're up more than 2 percentage points. Investors bullish on the social network. That's as it reports a 51% jump in sales to $8.8 billion. The company's user base is continuing to grow, adding 270 million monthly active users in just 1 year. Facebook has solidified its position, therefore, as number 2 in the market for mobile advertising, behind Alphabet's Google. So, how will it continue with this sort of momentum into 2017? Back with us, Melissa Parrish, Forrester Research Director, and David Kirkpatrick, CEO of Techonomy and Bloomberg contributor. Now, let's start off, Melissa, a little bit more with the share reaction that we're seeing and the phenomenal growth overall that we're seeing. I mean, if we think about it, almost 250 million users added in just a year. One of my colleagues, Ovide, who writes for Gadfly, was saying, look, actually, this is basically an entire Twitter that they've added.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it is incredibly phenomenal. I mean, I see these numbers and it kind of blows my mind. Even though I've been following Facebook as an analyst for years, I just think back to 1999, 2000, when I was in social media before we called it that, and we ended with 10 million users, and we're like really excited. So, I mean, this thing is just it is like adding a whole Twitter in a year. Phenomenal.
And in terms, therefore, of how you think Mark Zuckerberg will be reacting, David, I know you know him personally, and notably, he's been adding about $3 billion to his wealth, I think, at the overall mark. But how much do you think, we've got a bit of a lean into what he's been saying. One of the key issues is, of course, fake news, and this is what he said on the call. We just have a technical issue there. We'll bring you that sort after hours. But he was basically just saying, look, they are still trying to tackle fake news. But overall, is he going to be generally optimistic about the direction of his company?
Are you kidding? I would say he has no choice but to be optimistic, and he always has been a chronic optimist. Anyway, one thing, though, that did occur to me, we've heard so much about his other activities in the last few months, more than we really ever have. The speculation he might run for president, which I don't think is accurate, at least not anytime soon. His huge move into philanthropy, giving away his money or putting it into a different structure that will allow him to give it away over time. And one thing that struck me listening to the results is that I imagine he feels a little more comfortable devoting his attention to those other activities, whatever they may be, now, just because Sheryl Sandberg is such a miraculously good business leader, then the business itself is so solid that even though I'm sure he continues to have as strong opinions as he ever has about the product direction, and he has all kinds of ideas about how virtual reality will change everything, he doesn't have to worry about it day to day at all. I mean, it is just a juggernaut pounding forward. And I think Sheryl, having had a rough couple of years, is back in the saddle, clearly making all the great decisions she's always made. I mean, it is an astonishing machine. And I think you were right to pull out this 270 million figure as a noteworthy number. How can one company be adding 270 million customers in 1 year? I don't think we've ever seen any company in any business do that. It reminds me of, certain numbers characterize companies like Apple having more than $240 billion in cash right now. These companies at these scale, we've never seen anything like it.
And what I want to bring, it's phenomenal numbers and they're mind-blowing, but what I'd also like to bring, Melissa, is perhaps a little bit of copycat that's been going on and whether this is the right way to go, because they couldn't buy Snapchat, so instead they seem to be pulling a few leaves out of their book, and we saw Instagram roll out stories to great success. We're now seeing Facebook do the same. Are they right to try and tackle Snapchat as a direct competitor in such a way?
It's a crazy question because pretty much any other company, I would absolutely say, no, I'm not a fan of copycat strategy. I think it very rarely works. Eventually you saturate the market and then nobody wins from a user perspective. But in this case, when you have nearly 2 billion users and a certain kind of feature is capturing the hearts and minds of a certain demographic, I mean, sure, right? Why not? Especially because it gives them some runway. They can test and learn. Some things will stick and some things won't, and it's not going to hurt them. If they can build a feature that is just as good as what somebody else has and see how it works for them, why the heck not?
David, why the heck not build a Snapchat competitor? Yeah. But will it ever be able to draw over the millennials? Because Facebook maybe just didn't quite have the cool factor that Snapchat does. Do you think that they can draw in more millennials with Instagram?
It seems like Facebook is somewhat diminishing in its sort of appeal to millennials generally, certainly the younger millennials and the group coming up behind them. But I will say, considering that they made that brilliant move to buy Instagram, they have a hedge strategy that's really effective, and they're going to keep those people in their community one way or another. They certainly are worried about Snapchat vis-a-vis Instagram per se. Anyway, whether it's Facebook that's threatened or Instagram, it's hard to argue. But the good thing for them about Snapchat is that it's still pretty much a U.S. phenomenon. And, I think it does make sense, as Melissa says, for them to be borrowing, and they admitted at Instagram that they are copying Snapchat. Because until Snapchat really does get traction outside the U.S., since they already have traction elsewhere, they can roll these things out before Snapchat can in other geographies. So it is, somewhat brutal, but probably effective strategy.
On the rocket internet always deployed, but fascinating. You were talking about their global growth, and it was great to get your perspective, David. Kirkpatrick, CEO of Techonomy, and of course Melissa Parrish, Forrester Research Director. Wonderful to have such viewpoints on the earnings day of Facebook. Now, General Electric has recently been focusing in on software and analytics. So what can we expect from the industrial company in the near future? Well, General Electric Chairman and CEO Jeff Immelt sat down with Bloomberg's Editor-in-Chief John Micklethwaite for an exclusive interview at Bloomberg's bureau in Boston. Take a listen.
It wasn't an initiative to be in the software business per se. It was more the recognition that, our new jet engines have a couple hundred sensors on them. They provide this continuous stream of data. We made the decision that we want to model that data on behalf of our customers, not relegate it to somebody else. That led us back into the chain of adding software talent, building a software platform. So our theory, John, is that every industrial company is going to have to be a digital and software company. We wanted to lead that kind of path, and that's how we've invested.
Do you feel at home with that? I mean, GE is still a...
I've had to relearn. In other words, I think one of the things when you're running GE is you always have to say, why not us? It's kind of like, what's next? Let's try. And so we brought in a lot of people from the industry to help us. But myself, I've had to kind of learn new ideas on technology.
Loosen your tie.
Exactly.
But all the same, but there is that. But how do you deal with that? GE is one of those companies which has got a famously strong culture.
Yeah.
That strong one-day hockey playing element, which is not exactly the same as
we've
what
had
you find.
We've had to change. Again, I think you've got to recruit the talent. So you're never gonna hope to do that. And then you have to get people that are comfortable with the kind of speed and culture that Silicon Valley, the way people get paid, the pace at which you have to go. People have to learn to live in a kind of a horizontal and vertical world at the same time, which is hard. But then we also have to bring the digital people. Look, if you're in an airplane at 35,000 feet, do you want to think that people that made that engine quit their company every 5 years?
No.
You know? So you've got to bring a little bit of the industrial thinking into the digital realm at the same time.
What would GE look like in 20 years' time? I mean,
look, I think we're going to be, kind of still have an industrial core, but we're going to be a big software player in 20 years' time. We're going to be deep. I would say, I don't know that we're going to be broader as a company. I don't know that we're going to be in more industries, but we're going to be much deeper. We're going to go from information all the way through how things get made. So I think you're going to see a GE that's deeper, maybe not broader.
So deeper into individual, so the same industries, aircraft,
but doing analytics, making the parts through additive manufacturing, right? That to me is more value content in the industries we serve.
Do you see 3D printing, and that we mentioned it a couple of times?
Is that massively transformative? I really do. Now, getting back to your global point, one of the things about analytics and additive manufacturing is it kind of democratizes the supply chain. So it basically says you can do in a factory with 300 or 400 or 500 people what it used to take you 2,000 people to do. So that's another thing to factor in. But we are investing in both of these in a substantial way.
One of the great, I think I even pestered you about this 16 years ago, the idea of a conglomerate. You sit there, you're now a much more sort of focused company, with perhaps the arguable exception of the one you used to run, the medical services bit. That seems a little bit more separate to the rest of it. Is that fair?
Well, it's really the genesis of our medical business all comes from the Global Research Center. So we basically invented the X-ray tube 100 years ago. All the life sciences stuff we do comes out of our research centers. So we kind of see healthcare as part of the package, but all of which rests on, kind of a common core that we call the GE store. Yeah.
And is the core of GE still that management ethos? Is it still taking people back to the...
I think management is key. I think you always have to be good at culture and leadership. But one of the things today is nothing's general anymore. In other words, when I first became CEO, we were in pet insurance, media, we made jet engines. That's too hard today. I think you've got to have this combination of depth and breadth, and you've got to have managers that are maybe more technical, know domains better. So I think that we've had to reshape leadership and culture.
You mean the old system of somebody at GE going to work at NBC and then going to work in medical services and shifting around? I
think it's much more constrained today. We still want people to be broad, but they also have to be deep, or else you can't pick the right ideas. You can't drive the kind of change that's required.
That was GE Chairman and CEO Jeff Immelt speaking with Bloomberg Editor-in-Chief John Micklethwaite. France has issued an ultimatum to Uber. Pay drivers more or risk new legislation that would set a minimum wage equivalent for drivers. The country wants an agreement in place as early as next week between the ride-sharing company and the drivers' unions, staging protests for better pay. Now, a mediator has been appointed to coordinate discussions. If talks fail, France will recommend a legal minimum pay for the drivers based on time and distance travelled. And looking to Apple now, shares rose more than 6% in Wednesday trading, the biggest gain since July. This after posting record iPhone sales for the first quarter, their fiscal first quarter. That one-day gain for the stock was equal to $39 billion. Now, to put that in perspective, that value is bigger than the entire market capitalization of companies including eBay, HPE, but just shy of Yahoo's market cap of $42 billion. Wow. And staying with Apple, turning to a Bloomberg scoop, the company is designing a new chip for Mac laptops, thereby stepping into Intel's turf. More details ahead. This is Bloomberg. Apple is designing a new chip for future Mac laptops that would take one more of the functionality currently handled by Intel processors. This, according to people familiar with the matter. The chip went into development last year and is said to be similar to the one already used in the latest MacBook Pro to power the Touch Bar feature. Joining us now with the scoop is Bloomberg Technology's Mark Gurman. Another great piece of reporting by you, Mark. And first of all, the functionality behind this chip, what's going to offer?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And There's a great story between me and our chips expert, Ian King, but basically they're going to be doing more with this ARM chip than they've been doing already. Right now the ARM chip does some security and the Touch ID and the payments functionality with Touch ID and the Touch Bar. Now they're going to expand that to this new Power Nap feature, which is a low power mode, which should really save some more battery life on Mac laptops.
As you mentioned, ARM Holdings is the technology supplier. It's the designer of the chips. It's now been bought by SoftBank. But tell us about the inroads this is making on Intel's turf.
Right, so Intel is the commonplace chip supplier from Apple to Dell to other laptop and desktop computer makers. But really, they failed in mobile years ago with the transition to mobile chips, which Apple and Samsung and Qualcomm have been building for phones and tablets already for half a decade. The first iPhone with its own Apple in-house chip came out 7 years ago with the iPhone 4 and the first iPad. And so now Apple's looking to do a little bit more and step on Intel's turf some more with its own Mac components.
And what does this allow Apple to do? I mean, is it all about cost cutting? Why would it want control so much of these sorts of supplies?
Well, there's a few things here, and again, this is just one step in a long-term exploration of going completely in-house on Apple chips. But Apple is really known for its integration of hardware and software and making its own components lets Apple own more of that integration. Also, like you said, cost savings, but it also puts the company on its own roadmap. If they want to have a more efficient laptop, now they're finding ways to create these co-processors to speed up security, improve performance of battery components, like we put in our report today, and they're doing their own chips. It puts them on their own roadmap. They don't have to worry about Intel on that front.
It's a great scoop from yourself and Ian King. Bloomberg technology reporter Mark Gurman, thank you for joining us. Now, Sequoia Capital is shaking things up. The prominent Silicon Valley venture firm that backed the likes of Apple, Cisco and Google announced that longtime partner Jim Goetz will be stepping back from a leadership role. Goetz is famous for leading the investment in WhatsApp, which was acquired by Facebook for $22 billion back in 2014. And the deal saw the firm's $60 million investment in the company explode to the value of $3.5 billion, making it one of the most lucrative venture investments. Well, he will be passing the baton on to Roloff Botha, who has co-led the US venture business with Goetz since 2007. Up next, more takeaways from Facebook's latest earnings report. Shares losing some of their earlier gains in after-hours trading, but they're still in the green. They're still going to be at record highs if they hold on to it. This is Bloomberg. Facebook's earnings call, it continues, and the stock is still higher, although losing some of its steam from the earlier gains. What's encouraging investors? Perhaps the 51% jump in sales. That's got to be whetting the appetite. Mobile advertising continuing to drive Facebook's growth as the company gains on its #1 mobile ad rival, Google. For more, I want to bring in Bloomberg intelligence analyst Jitendra Warrell. Thank you, Jitendra, for joining us. And you've got some highlights for us because maybe the future growth path is really all about Instagram. They've got some amazing, 5 million businesses now advertising on the service?
500,000.
500,000.
Versus 4 million,
5 million
on
pages.
Facebook.
Amazing. And so give us a sense of Instagram's future potential.
So right now, this is just the start for Instagram and video for Facebook. You know, so far we're talking about probably $1 billion roundabout that run rate, but the potential here is massive. Like the delta we saw between 500,000 versus 4 million. And if you look at the user growth, it was 50% in 1 year. You know, from now they're at 600 million, and daily active users at 400 million. That's a very rock solid number. So Instagram and video, I believe, could help them offset some of the ad load worries that Facebook has for this year, where revenue growth is expected to slow down. I mean, if you look at the street, they're expecting 33% revenue growth next year from 50% plus this year. But Instagram and video is the untapped potential here.
And quite amazing if you're saying 4 million advertisers on Facebook, and they've actually got 65 million business pages. And when you put that into perspective, you've got 5 million businesses on Instagram, but for only 500,000 actually advertising. The growth clearly is big there. Right. What about the way in which they are advertising? It's all been about video, and you think video is actually a bit of a secret winner here too?
So if you look at the video ad market in general, nobody has cracked the code yet on measurement. You know, that's why video is still like 10% of what the TV is. When they are able to do that, that's when the mass market's going to shift. We don't think that's going to happen near term, but they're taking steps. They're partnering with third-party vendors to improve measurement and targeting and henceforth. So what Instagram is going to do is give ad units that would probably be higher priced than Facebook, because it's more visual. They could push videos and pilot some of these strategies on Instagram and push that. So I feel Instagram has a potential that could be unlocked this year.
What about the potential of tomorrow? What about Amazon? We're all going to be eyes on that particular company. And where is this fan going to do?
So the demand side of the equation is pretty strong. So that's not a worry. The worry is if you look at 4Q15, Amazon missed earnings mostly because the FBA demand was so strong that they had to spend more on logistics to meet the demand. So they couldn't actually meet the demand. So profitability took a hit. Now we already saw that Amazon wants to increase the headcount and the investments continue to grow. So the profitability side of the equation is a little iffy. The way they describe it is it's going to ebb and flow. On the cloud services side of the equation, it should be fine. The growth is rock solid. Look at Microsoft.
Where do they stand versus the likes of Microsoft right now? Is AWS still top?
Well, they're pretty much number one right now. We're talking about, they have a run rate of about $10 billion. But if you look at the industry, by 2020, it's expected to top $70 billion. And that number keeps on going up as well. So the runway is fairly long. So cloud services should be fine. Demand side should be fine from a top line. The profitability aspect, that might have some flags to watch out for.
Well, we know Jeff Bezos sometimes promises jam tomorrow, never jam today. Jitendra, as ever, great to have your analysis. Thank you very much indeed. It was Jitendra Warrell of Bloomberg Intelligence. That's it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Tune in for tomorrow and Amazon results. This is Bloomberg.